everybody, my name's Lindsay and today we're going to do a Phoenix frame install. So first we're going to talk about what you'll get in your kit. Alright, so in your package you're going to get the robot, you're going to get cables that you need, there will be a zip tie bag with zip tie bases, you get an X belt, a Y belt, this is your idler bracket and your Y bracket. These both go with the black or the Y belt. You get X brackets that go with your white or X belt. You get a display and you get the power cord to hook up to your robot. All right, so then we have the tools that we're gonna need. I have two different sized Phillips screwdrivers. Then you have a Allen head wrench that's size 3/16, and then some side snips or some sharp scissors to cut your zip ties with. All right, so now we have a frame, and one of the important things on the Phoenix frame is this white bracket right here. This is where you're going to mount your robot to. You want to make sure that this bracket is in the front of your frame and not the rear. If it is in the rear, you just need to flip your carriage around. All right, so we're going to install the X brackets, which are these guys. You're gonna need a screwdriver and the Allen wrench, which is the 3/16. So you're gonna notice that there is a screw right here on the frame. You're gonna take that out with the Allen wrench. Take it completely out. We're then going to take the X bracket and we're going to put this hole, we're going to line up with the hole in the frame and then just screw in the screw. And then I'm just going to get it almost tight. And then what we're going to do is we want to flip it up like this, because that's how we're installing them. Make sure they're straight and tighten them up nice and tight. And then what I'm just going to do is make sure this is all the way forward and just make it snug so we can thread the belt next. The next part you want to do is you now want to straighten out this black bracket. This is going to hold your belt. So just straighten it out and we're just going to make it snug at this point because we can use these to adjust the tightness of the white or X belt. So once you have this set up like this, you're going to want to go to the other side of the frame and do the exact same thing. And then we will run the white belt. Okay, so now we're going to thread the white belt through these brackets. You're going to want to go up, through the closest one to the bracket, and then down through the furthest. And then on this side I'm just going to add a zip tie right here at the end. You're going to want to leave, I'd say 1 inch to 2 inch tail, and then we're just going to zip tie it. That's going to keep the belt from slipping. So go ahead and just zip tie that one pretty tight, and then you're just going to take your side snips or your sharp scissors, whatever you have, and cut the extra tail. All right, we're going to thread this side as well. Again, go up through the slot that's closest to the bracket, and this time you're going to want to pull it pretty tight. I'm using a short belt just because I'm using a short show frame. Your belt will more than likely be quite a bit too long for what you have. But go ahead and thread it through. So go back down through the furthest one from the bracket. And you're gonna want to get it pretty tight, as tight as you can, at least on this. And then you're gonna add, once you have it tight as you think you can get it that way, you're gonna want to add the zip tie to this one as well. And again, a tail of about 1 inch to maybe 2 inches. Go ahead and zip tie that nice and tight. And then again, we're gonna take the side snips, cut off our extra zip tie, and you can go ahead and cut off the extra belt that you have. All right, your robot will have 2 screws just screwed into the top. You're gonna want to unscrew those, take them out completely. And then we're gonna attach the robot. So those 2 holes that you just took the screws out are gonna line up with the 2 holes on this white bracket. Make sure that your pulleys, which are these, are facing towards the machine, and your clutch, which is what we call this, is disengaged, so it's easy to run the belt through. All right, so you might need another person to help you hold the robot while you get the screws lined up. Once you get the screws lined up, and we want to tighten them all the way. I want to make sure both of them are tight. All right, then we'll move to the next step. Okay, so again, we want to make it sure that this clutch is disengaged, which you can tell by these 2 being so low. If it's engaged, they're nice and tight like this, which would make getting the belt on super hard. So we want to make sure it's disengaged. And what we want to do is we want to go over this one, under this one, and over this one. So you're just going to thread it through so that it's over, under, over. And then that way, when you push the clutch in, it's now tight and clamped in. All right, so now we're going to talk about the tension on this belt, how tight we want it. So I currently have the machine and frame in the middle, or machine and carriage, I should say, in the middle of the frame. And I'm just going to apply pressure to the belt. And as you can see, it goes down pretty far and wiggles, which is not what we want. We want it to maybe go down 1/2 inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to these, and I am going to loosen the screw just on top, and I'm going to pull this back just a little bit, and then I'm going to tighten it. And now if we go back to our belt, you can see that it only goes down about 1/2 inch, which is where you want it to be. The other thing to note when you're checking the tension of your belts is to make sure that you have your clutch on the robot over here engaged. Otherwise your belt will be way too loose or tight, depending on how you tighten it. So again, just about 1/2 inch of play in your belt. So we're just going to talk about the belts again from a different angle. We've got the machine and carriage in the middle of the frame. Our robot clutch is engaged. And what we're going to do is we're just going to test each side. So you just push down a little bit. You don't need to like forcefully do it. Just push down halfway between the carriage and the brackets. And you want it to go down about 1/2 inch. And then we'll go to the other side, again the same thing. You want it to go down about 1/2 inch. So once we get it there, which is where we like it, you're going to take your screwdriver and you're going to tighten these screws. Now, if this wasn't tight enough, you can loosen the screw a little bit. And you can slide these back, but I have it tight enough now. But these will slide back so you can help tighten it without messing with your belt and the zip ties again. So just make sure these are tight on both sides once you've got the belt the right tightness. All right, we're going to take your idler bracket, which looks like this. On the back, it's got what we call a nut plate, and we're going to put it in these last two holes on the frame. So you're going to unscrew both screws so that the black bracket and the nut plate come completely apart. Then you're going to take them apart. The nut plate goes underneath. You're going to line up the holes, and the black bracket goes on top. And you're going to line up the holes as well. You might need an extra person to help hold things, or you might be able to start them by yourself. So then you're just going to start the screws and screw them in all the way. You also might, just to mention, have to drill those two holes out just a tiny bit. It looks like that's what we did earlier on this frame. But once you get it there, just go ahead and tighten those screws up nice and tight, like so. Okay, so we're gonna thread the belt through this bracket before we attach everything. So I have just taken the screws and the nut plate off of this and set them aside for now. So you've got your belt, and you're gonna thread this side. You're gonna go up through the furthest inside and then down through the outside. This is going to make it so your belt is facing out away from the bracket. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So up through and then down. And you're only going to want to leave a little bit because we're still going to want to have extra so we can thread it through the idler and the robot. Okay, so I'm just going to drop the belt through the carriage, through the frame. Also, just make sure before you attach this bracket, your belt is not twisted, because that makes for a pain to redo it. So we are going to use these two holes on this carriage. As you can see, they're the only two holes on this inside. The outside has holes, but we're not using those. We're using the inside ones. So you're going to take your bracket, the parts where the belt is connected goes down. You're going to line these two slots up with the hole, and then you're going to take this nut plate and line up the holes on that as well. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take the screws, and they're going to go from the bottom. There's two holes on the bottom. They're going to go through and line up with the nut plate and screw into it. So you're going to want to get that started. And then we'll do the same thing with the other one. And it's a little tight space down here, but it all works. So you're going to want to screw them in tight. And just make sure your bracket stays on there, doesn't slide out. Once you get it tight, that these screws will hold the slots from sliding anywhere. Okay. As you can see, once it's nice and tight, it's not sliding anywhere. All right, so then you're going to take the black belt and we're going to loop it around the idler here. And then we're going to loop it around the robot up here. All right, so as you can see, we've got the both the teeth on both sides are facing each other. It's important to note that when your idler is mounted on the left-hand side of your carriage, like this one is, the straight part of this belt is on the outside, well, I guess the innermost side, because you're inside the machine, of that bracket. So it's on this inside. We don't want it to be back here. That's going to make the robot read incorrectly and cause problems. So we want it to be on this side of the bracket. Now, as you can see, it's not tight yet. So you can pull these tight just a little bit because I left them pretty loose. So I could get them around the robot. Now, one of the things you'll notice is how close this part of the black belt is to this bracket. And we prefer that distance to be a little bit further apart. So the option for that is we're gonna move where this idler is on the bracket. So I'll show you that next. Okay, so on this bracket, you can see that there are 3 different holes that the bearings could go in. And so since this part of the black belt is so close to the bracket, I'm going to move this idler to this other hole to pull it away. And you just simply unscrew it from the hole and move it to the next one and screw it in nice and tight. So now, if you look at our belts, you can see, I haven't tightened them completely yet, but you can see that this is already pulled away further from the bracket than it was to begin with. So I'm just going to go ahead and tighten these. I'll pull these tighter, and then we'll show you how tight the black belt should be. All right, so as you can see on this black belt, we have added the zip ties, again, just to hold the belt in. As you can see, there's about a 1/2 inch of play in there. We don't want it to be so tight like a piano string or a guitar string. That's going to cause the belt to wear faster, but we don't want it so loose that it falls off of this pulley here on the robot or this idler bearing right here. So as you can see, you just want about a 1/2 inch of play. All right, your display bracket, if it has Quilty Z electronics, is going to look exactly like this. If it doesn't, the display bracket will look slightly different, but they all have these little display bases on them that have screws in them. And you're going to need to take the screws out of the little display bases all the way, because that's where we're going to screw the display that you have purchased as part of your package into. All right, so now we're going to install the display. This one here is the 12-inch display that goes with the Ruby Sewing Machines Plus Professional and the Juki Imperial. As you can see, the back of the display has bracket that will match with these 2 display bases. So you're just going to install it on the outside of those 2 display bases and then insert the screws and screw them in. All right, so we have the screws started in here. As you can see, it adjusts to whichever angle works best for you. So find whichever angle that is, and then go ahead and tighten the screws up as tight as they will go. And that on both sides, you'll have to do both of them. But that will hold it at the angle which you like. Like that. All right, now we're gonna plug in the cables, and for this particular machine, we're going to use the integrated port. There are different variations of this machine, so you could have just slightly different cabling, but please check with your dealer or the manual if you have any questions. So I'm going to plug it into the integrated port like that, and then this other end here is going to go to the back of the machine. So I'm just going to throw it over there. And come around. We're going to want to kind of thread it through so that it's out of the way and will move. And then at the back of this box here, there's a port that says robotics, and we're going to plug it in there. All right, your machine should have a cable run through that goes from the white box that we were just at and comes out with an RJ45 or like a phone jack. It's going to plug into the top of this black box right here and just snap in like that. Okay, now we're gonna put the power cable in. It's a 3-prong, looks kind of like Mickey Mouse. We're gonna plug that right here into the robot. It'll click a little bit, and that means it's all the way plugged in. All right, so we're going to talk about cable management now, which means how to run the cables around the carriage and the machine so they don't get in the way of the carriage or anything while it is running. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these sticky base anchors and stick it on the robot. If I can get it to peel off. We're going to stick it underneath the robot down here. You can kind of see where my hands are. My hand is. We're just going to stick it down there. And what we want to do is we're going to zip tie the cable with a loop about this big. This is just so we don't get any tension pulling on this that could cause problems. So I'm just going to take one of my zip ties, run it through the base anchor, which you'll see later when we get to one where you can see better. And we're just going to run it through the zip tie and zip tie it nice and tight, and then I'm just going to come through at the end and snip all the extra zip ties. So that's the first one we're going to do. All right, so then we're going to run the same cable. It's going to go in between the carriage here and the frame here. And the Phoenix frame with its carriage has holes in the carriage already that you can just zip tie things through. So I'm just going to use one of those, and I'm just going to kind of zip tie it out of the way back here so it's not hitting any of the cables, of the tracks, of the belts, anything like that, because any little resistance the robot experiences, if it's enough resistant, it'll give you an error saying that it couldn't move. And so a lot of times the culprit of that is just a cable is loose or something like that to check. So you're just going to zip tie it out of the way like so. All right, so I am going to use this base anchor that's already here. So I'm just going to snip it, making sure not to cut the cable. So I'm just going to grab a zip tie, and you just thread it through both sides, and then both your cables come in, and you zip tie it nice and tight so that they're out of their way. All right, so now I'm just going to run the cable through the inside of the carriage. I unplugged it from the machine so I could. And what we're going to want to do at this point is we're going to move the machine as far forward as we can, which it'll run into the bar, making sure we can reach, and then as far back as we can, again making sure we can reach. And then I'm just going to make a little coil down here at the end, because again there are little holes already that you can use for the zip ties. Make sure you're not enclosing any of your encoder cables in your cable as well. So I'm going to guess that we need about this much extra cable. I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. And now I'm going to pull it forward. And so see, I guessed a little bit wrong, so I'm just going to pull the other coil out. And see, we have extra, and we've hit as far forward as we go, and we have plenty extra as far back as we go. So I'm just going to take one of my zip ties here. That fell on the floor. And we're just going to run it through one of these already pre-drilled holes that are here from the carriage already, and tighten it up nice and tight. And then again, just double check that you can go all the way forward with a little bit of slack, all the way, all the way back, and we should be good there. The only other thing is if there's a little bit, like in this case, there's a little bit sticking up. So I would take one of the base anchors that we have, and again, just peel it off the sticky, which could be the hardest part, if we're being honest. Peel the sticky back off. I'm gonna just stick it right there on the frame, run the zip tie through, and I'm just gonna zip tie this part down as well to keep it from interfering with the machine or belts. Like so. And then when you're done with that, our machine moves nice. We'll go ahead and just cut off all the extra zip tie tails. So I've turned on the machine and I've turned on the robot, and I'm going to hit this Perfect Stitch app. For this particular machine, since it does have the Lindzee electronics on it, you could be prompted to upgrade to the newest version, and you do want to do that. It might take a minute. Everything has been successfully uploaded. So this is the screen you'll get if you have Lindzee electronics. If you have other people's electronics, that's also okay. Your screen will just pop up looking like this. One of the things we want to check for real quick is that our X and Y coordinates down here move. So I'm just going to pick a spot to hit the plus so that they both go to 0, 0. And as you move forward, this Y should get bigger and be positive. And then as you move to the right, the X should get bigger and go positive as well. That's just another check we use to make sure we have our belts installed correctly.